We aren't naturally grateful.
Even the way you drink coffee gets on my every nerve.
There's so many things we can be thankful for.
If you're thanked a lot, you're more likely to keep doing something. Welcome to the Grace Marriage Podcast. I'm Brad Rhoads.
And I'm Marilyn Rhoads. We're here to help you build a marriage that's stronger, more connected, and full of grace.
I'm Rick Dayton, joining Brad and Marilyn as we bring you weekly conversations designed to inspire and equip you to live intentionally in your marriage.
We'll share practical tips, powerful stories, and strategies to help you and your spouse grow closer and thrive together.
So whether you're just starting out or have been married for years, there's always room to grow. Let's do this together. This is the Grace Marriage Podcast.
The idea of having an attitude of gratitude, it's not just something that you do in part of your life. It's something that we probably should do in all of our life, and that includes our marriages. Hey, welcome back to the Grace Marriage Podcast. Rick Dayton along with Brad and Marilyn around the table as we're talking about the importance of gratitude in our marriage. There's something, Marilyn, that we were talking about yesterday as we were just visiting a little bit, that you were just saying that it's intentionality, that in your marriage, intentionality is there. And the same goes for being intentional about gratitude, right? It's not just an accident. It's not an afterthought. It needs to be something that you are really, really intentional about. Why so?
Oh, because we aren't naturally grateful. We just take things for granted, expect things to happen. We're going so fast and in a hurry. Brad might do something nice and I forget to thank him. I'm on to the next thing. So unless we take time to focus on what's good, lovely, praiseworthy, admirable, dwell on these things like Scripture says, we won't naturally do it. So when you do take the time to be grateful, it changes your heart towards your spouse.
Are you a journaler? Do you journal every day? Do you write things down in the morning as you're doing your quiet time? Is that something part of your routine?
I'm not a big journaler, but one thing I have in my Bible is a list of things I'm grateful for about Brad, and I try and add one thing to it on a daily basis.
She's on hard.
Go back.
She's on page 37.
Yeah.
And I was thinking she's stuck on the second or third one. I wasn't sure which one it was. But do you go back and reread that?
Absolutely,
okay.
Especially when I'm frustrated. It's a good exercise. That was which author did that? We read that in one of his books. It was
Gary Smalley.
Gary Smalley. He's had a list of all the things that he appreciated about his wife, and when they would fight, he would go back in his office and read through that list. And it's so true. I mean, there are times in our marriage where my mind is not in the right place, but when you take time to sit, there's so many things we can be thankful for about each other.
Do you write things down? I mean, I know you make lists, but I mean, do you do that same sort of thing?
I'm compulsive. So I either write a ton down or none. So right now I'm not writing them down, but I do revisit gratitude. But Marilyn's right. It's real motivating. Like if you're thanked a lot, you're more likely to keep doing something. If you're not thanked, you're not. And one time I had a friend of mine help me put up a fence, and I really was thankful for his help because I'm not a handy dude. And I kept thanking him. He said, "Praise a fool and watch him work." He says what my dad always told me. But I'm just joking. But he was like, but it's true. When you feel like somebody really appreciates you, you find yourself wanting to do more for them.
Right.
When you find somebody just totally takes you for granted and never notices what you do, it's harder to stay motivated.
So how then does gratitude play into a marriage? I mean, give me some specific ways that we can, rather than writing it down is important and it gives you a good framework, but day to day, let's get into the weeds on this one. I mean, how do we express that gratitude? Saying thank you is nice, but there are other things, and people have different love languages. We talked about that yesterday from Chapman, right? I mean, help me to understand this.
Well, it's selective perception. You find what you're looking for, the psychological principle. So if you're looking for the bad, you'll start seeing more and more bad. And then you'll all of a sudden then you'll get to a point where you don't even like your spouse at all. If you're looking for the good, you can find more and more good. And we have an exercise in Grace Marriage called the eye exam, where we have the participants stop and write everything down they appreciate about their spouse. Appearance, character, spirituality, everything. And what you find is when people start, they're having trouble writing much. And then all of a sudden, kind of
they're flipping the paper.
It opens up and they start going. And people love that exercise. And we've been doing it for years, and there's still tears because it's like when it's healing too. When you just realize, when Marilyn tells me, I think you're a great dad. And she tells me all the reasons she thinks I'm a great dad. It's like salve to my soul, because sometimes I don't really feel like that good a dad.
Sometimes it's hard to respond to that, isn't it? We don't know what to say.
It's just nice to know that we like each other and we're thankful for one another. But, into the weeds, it's just looking for the good each day. It's like thanking and being specific and thank you. Just like, hey, you look nice is one thing, but hey, a real detail of why you think they look nice. Hey, thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing that. It really helped my day. It really changed things. It really made it so that I was able to tolerate the day. That was a big deal. So when you flesh out a compliment, when you flesh out a thank you, all of a sudden it has stickiness and it becomes meaning. If it's just a cursory, hey, thanks, appreciate it, it's not remembered. So I think, if you want to get in the weeds, get detailed.
And it's way different to send somebody a handwritten thank you note than to send them a text that says THX, right? I mean, there's a very big difference. There's an intentionality about writing that note. Nobody gets a thank you card in the mail anymore. But when you do, you feel like, you know what? They took the time to do this and send it.
Really nice.
Right? It's really nice.
Marilyn always opens it up and hopes there's a gift card in it.
That's hysterical.
Marilyn, stick with me here for just a second. There's a podcast, and I'm a crazy golfer. There's a podcast that I listen to, and the woman was a professional golfer, and now she teaches people. So one of the things that she said is that if you're feeling anxious and you're feeling stressed about a round of golf or whatever, before you tee off, take the time to make a list in your brain of the things you're thankful for. You're outside in God's green earth. You're in a beautiful golf course. You're really enjoying playing with the people that you're going to be with. It's a beautiful day, white, fluffy clouds and a blue sky, and you're just saying, I get a chance to do this today. You cannot be anxious if you are being grateful, is her contention. Does that make sense? From a counseling standpoint, is there good science behind that, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I know in one of the darkest spots in my life, when we had really some health crisis with our kids that year, I'd mentioned struggling. I was reading a book called 1,000 Gifts by Ann Voskamp. I don't know if you've read that book.
I do know it, yeah.
So I was really anxious and depressed, and I wrote 1,000 things I was thankful for. I've worked on that the whole summer, and I've done that again another time. And it was huge how the Lord helped use that to lift me out of a dark spot. So gratitude is absolutely salve to our soul, like Brad said. And when we come together, every time we've been doing Grace Marriage for how long we've been meeting it?
12
years. And we meet on a quarterly basis. And often life is hard and you don't feel like you're killing it in every area of life. But when we sit down to write the gratitude, it might be what's gone well over the last quarter. What are you thankful for over the last quarter that you've accomplished, or together with your spouse? All of a sudden I say, man, a lot has happened that's good over this last quarter. And you almost take a deeper breath, a sigh of relief when you do this exercise, and it just sets your heart in a right place.
Yeah. It does. And one thing's important to note too, it's if you're anxious and you're depressed and you just make a list of what you're grateful for, it's not all of a sudden the anxiety and the depression goes away. Because I was in a dark spot one time, and I read that passage in Philippians. It said, be anxious about nothing, but in everything with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and and the peace of God will transcend, that will overcome you. So I did it. Like I prayed, I wrote what I was grateful for, like I held my arms out, like a peace hit me, like fix me. And, and I was so frustrated that it didn't fix me. But a practice of gratitude over a long period of time promotes emotional health, and it is extremely helpful. Right. So I don't want people to get discouraged that all of a sudden I try to be grateful and I'm still anxious.
Right.
But it's a good practice that will help you.
It is. It is helpful just if you keep practicing it. It does.
And it promotes affection. I mean, we've had couples do the eye exam where they're writing down everything they love about each other's appearance, and had one couple come to me after the session. They just finished sharing what they wrote with each other in structured communication. He said, dude, we're going to have to leave. He said, we got to go get us a room. I mean, but literally it promotes emotion and affection. So a lot of times Meryl and I are coming to our Grace Marriage sessions, and we won't be into each other sometimes. It's just like kids and life and work. And then I'll hear Marilyn say all these things about me. She'll hear all these things about her. I'm like, wow, God has given us something really special. I mean, man, Marilyn is such a gift. So it really does promote positive emotion.
Why do you call it the eye test? Where does that come from? I mean, we think of it just saying somebody passes the eye test. They're on the all airport team. As they walk through an airport, you say, boy, that looks like a really good football player, right? I mean, it passes the eye test.
Well, Marilyn definitely passed the eye test when I first met her.
That's funny.
Well, you said that was physical attraction was one of the first things.
No, but we call it the eye exam because your eye, how are you looking at things? You examine how you're looking at things.
Right.
Are you looking at Jenny and trying to find everything great about that lady? Or are you looking at Jenny and finding what's wrong with Jenny?
Right.
There's something wrong with all of us. I mean, we're all flawed.
Yeah.
I mean, but what are you looking for? So the reason we call it the eye exam is because once you examine your eyes, and what are you looking for? What are you focusing on? Because Scripture says if anything's excellent or praiseworthy, dwell on these things. So we want spouses to look for what's excellent and praiseworthy in their spouse and dwell on those things for the glory of the God and the good of their marriage. And research supports it. The John Gottman study shows if somebody looks for the good in one another and has a generally positive disposition toward one another, the chance of them ever experiencing crisis is minuscule.
And there earlier on in our marriage, we had an example, and this is, I share this story in our book and in some of the materials, but it's such a very specific example. Brad and I looked at a house to buy, and I had already decorated it in my mind. Like it was the
You'd
house.
moved in.
I'd moved in
God had
mentally.
but laid it right there for us.
Yeah.
Brad didn't have a peace about it. He didn't think this was the right time, the right house. So we didn't you can't buy a house you both don't agree on.
Right.
So we didn't get the house. And that began the focus of my brain on how I felt about Brad. And so, I mean, I was
It got
so
worse.
angry. And so everything he was doing was getting on my nerves. And
You
one
felt hurt? I mean, what was it?
well,
that
I
you-
was just,
that he didn't want it like you did? Where was that coming from?
it was coming from I wanted the house and we didn't get it. But we didn't get it because we both needed it.
Right.
Be on the same page to purchase a house. That's kind of a big purchase. You need to find one you both like. So I was mad we didn't get the house. I was basically pouting about it.
And it wasn't just I didn't like it. We
Right, it
ran
wasn't
it by
about-
5 folks like financially and had them look at it, and
Right.
they all recommended us to pass. But it did pass kind of some of the Ramsey test and things. So it's a lot of just a different perspective on finances too.
Yes, that was a piece of it too. So I agreed we shouldn't buy the house, but inside I was mad about it. And so it just started a stretch of him being on my nerves because I'm focused on everything that bothers me that Brad does. And so one morning I got up and I was so mad. You want to drink your coffee like that? That's hysterical.
I've heard this story before, but they haven't. So go ahead, share. Share.
So I literally, I was getting ready to have my quiet time and I thought, I can't be in the same room with this guy. Like that's and I went outside on our swing, and because the way, I mean, it just, everything was on my nerves. And so I
She
sat down on
told
the
me, she
swing.
goes, even the way you drink coffee gets on my every nerve.
Yeah. So I go outside and I
not
felt
funny,
really,
but we've
it
all
is
been
funny.
there.
I know.
No,
so
we've all been there.
So I went out on the porch on the swing and I'm pouting and I'm mad, and I wouldn't say I'm pouting, but I'm just mad. And so I just really felt the Lord say, you need to write him a letter, tell him everything you love about him. And so I
A lot of people would have written a letter, all the things that make you mad.
Right.
I mean, seriously, in that moment,
Right.
a lot of people would have done the opposite.
Or at least got me a straw.
Yeah. Sippy cup.
That's what I'm going to get you for Father's Day. And I did. So I sat there, and as I wrote a letter to him of all the things I loved about him, it completely started changing how I felt about him. And I was able to let that go, and it totally shifted my perspective.
And she came in.
It was crazy. And that's how powerful this is.
And when she came in, she was all handsy, and it was awkward.
He says a lot of things that aren't true.
In his mind,
Yeah,
that's
he
the way it
said-
happened.
yeah.
In his mind, that's the way it happened. I heard somebody years ago preach a sermon that was talking about prayer. And one of the things that it mentioned is that when you are praying, and your passage from Philippians brought this to mind a little bit ago, that when you pray, think about taking and putting what you are praying, asking for, a prayer of supplication, in a box. And you take that and you put it on the kitchen counter and you close the flaps and you take the packing tape and you tape it shut. You put the label on there. You take it to UPS. You hand it to the UPS driver and you ship it away. Once you have done that, you can't take it back. that if we are really going to give that up, if we are really going to send that away and give that to God, we can't take it back. And I think there's a parallel there with gratitude also. Once you make that decision, okay, I am going to look for the things, you can't say, well, I'm going to today, but he made me mad, so I'm not going to, right? I mean, it's got to be, we're all in on this or we're not.
It is a battle though, because it's like our natural, like if you're completely healthy and you have one cut on your leg, the only thing you can think of is the pain the cut is causing. It takes real intentionality to think, wow, my brain's working fine, my arms
My
are
wrist is good,
everything's
my elbow's
good.
fine, right.
So it takes real intentionality to focus on what's working. It's real easy to focus on what's not working. So when I do pastoral crisis counseling, a couple may come in with 19 things working, one not working. But the one thing not working dominates 95% of their thinking. So my goal is to help that dominate 5% of their thinking, not 95% of their thinking. So they're dominated by gratitude, which gives them energy and appreciation for one another that allows them to work through that particular issue.
Right. How do you change that thinking though? How do you help people change that mind? I mean, you've worked through it. You said 12 years even doing these eye exams, right? So you're kind of used to it. Somebody who's new to it, how do you help them walk that?
Oh, it just begin by sitting down and just start writing it, praying it, focusing on it. When you start to go towards the negative, make yourself counter it with a positive. It's just a practical exercise that it's not natural. We naturally, like Brad said, we naturally focus on what hurts or what's not going well or something we don't. It's just our brains naturally go there. So it's a practice.
And for some people, it's harder than others.
Well, that was my next question.
Some people are naturally negative, and some people are just. I mean, I've got friends. I mean, I can't listen to one recommendation they have because they love everything. I mean, it's the best chicken salad I've ever eaten. Oh, you got to see that movie. But they are so positive. It comes kind of natural.
But there are other people who are the other way.
Oh, the other people,
right?
the other people the other way. It's just it's so recognize kind of where you are. And if you kind of tend to be a half empty person, you're somebody that sees problems more than answers. Now, people that see problems, they're gifted people and they see problems, they fix problems, but they've got to be real aware of that to make sure that they're a grateful person, that they're not dominated by problem fixing and problem seeing. So it's a lot of it's knowing yourself. But for everybody, it's a battle every day. And it's not only the key to closeness in marriage, it's the key to closeness with God. I mean, enter his courts with thanksgiving, gates with thanksgiving, enter his courts with praise. So how do we enter the presence of God? With thanksgiving and praise. So, I mean, like to be close to one another and to be close to Jesus, it takes an attitude of worship and thanksgiving.
When you're doing these eye exams, are you the teacher who's walking around and looking to see what people are writing down, or are the two of you doing it at the same time?
The facilitators are participants. So when we facilitate, we participate just like everybody else. And everybody in Grace Marriage, the people that are facilitating the group are setting the example of investment for the group as they lead the group.
So do you ever see somebody do this? They get a piece of paper, they've got their pen, and they're sitting there going, I mean, do people get stuck? Is it hard or do people at this point, if they've said, yes, I'm going to go to Grace Marriage, they're open to suggestions and they want to try? I mean,
we don't find people, we find them get stuck initially, but when they start writing a few things, I mean, they realize, and in the curriculum, it gives them examples. Like, what do they do all day? Think it through it. I mean, my clothes don't wash themselves. Marilyn's really kind and helps there. I help some, but not enough. But I don't, unless I'm intentional, I just don't think, wow, it's amazing how hard Marilyn works every day. When I sit down in our eye exam,
right,
and I think, wow, Marilyn does so much that I don't even think about or thank her for, and I'm convicted.
Right.
I think most people, even people that are in a bad place, can list some good things about their spouse, things that they do, and it starts to help.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and it's just making sure you're intentional in that. And we try to do that in counseling stuff. I try to start out with, tell me why'd y'all get married in the first place? I mean, you obviously can't stand each other now.
So you don't start with the conflict. You're saying, okay, wait a second. Let's go ahead and build a little bit of a foundation behind it. And you need to understand also sort of the history of the relationship.
Yeah, I don't walk in and say, okay, just both specifically tell me why you hate each other. I would love to know. It'd be kind of make a fun reality show. No, what I say is, when you met, what was it about this dude that made you say yes to spend the rest of life with him?
Right.
What drew you to him? And a lot of times people realize those qualities are still there. but they've just completely gotten buried in life just coming at them, and neither one of them's handling it super well, and they're both on everybody's nerve.
So is gratitude that blanket or that umbrella that keeps it off of you? I mean, or is that just one of the tools that you're saying? It's kind of like you got galoshes, you got a raincoat, you got an umbrella, you got, it's something that keeps you dry underneath, that it takes multiple things.
It's one tool. It's one tool.
That's right.
You've got gratitude. I mean, if you're grateful for one another, but you never spend time together, I mean, it's not gonna fix the marriage. If you're spending time together, but you're not grateful for one another. So there's several different things in marriage that need to be in place for you to thrive, and Scripture makes that clear.
Got it. Well, if there are more things that you want to know, this is just one of those tools. The book called The Grace Marriage is available right now. You can get it on Amazon, anywhere that you buy books. But again, this is one that Brad and Marilyn wrote along with Brittany Craig, was the editor working through this from Moody. And this has done very, very well and has been reviewed very, very highly. Congratulations, by the way, on a recent honor for the book about how the gospel and intentionality transform your relationship. It's done very, very well in a very short period of time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to know more about what's going on with Grace Marriage, we invite you to come back on this podcast. Like, follow, subscribe, regardless of how you get your podcast. Share it with your friends. Let them know that you're getting something from this. And hey, go ahead and tag us. Let us know what's working for you, or maybe some things that maybe you could use a bit of help with, and we can reach out to you in that regard as well. We'll see you next time on the Grace Marriage Podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the Grace Marriage Podcast. We really hope you're feeling inspired to take intentional steps to grow in your marriage.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us spread the message of grace and reach even more couples.
And if you have a moment, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a lot to us and helps others discover the podcast.
To learn more about how you can grow in your marriage, visit us at gracemarriage.com. Keep building stronger, grace-filled marriages.
We'll see you next week on the Grace Marriage Podcast. Until then, keep growing in grace.